to begin.
You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, broadcasting live on your FM dial and streaming on KQBHLA.com. You're listening to the Social Primate with your host, Eddie Aguirre. And today we have some powerful storytellers in the house. We have Mala Muñoz and we have Diosa Femme, host of Locatora Radio. What's up?
Hey.
Hi, thank you for having us. Happy to be here.
So happy to be here in Boyle Heights, where Locatora started.
Hey, nice. That's amazing. Now, talking about them, just real quick, I want to congratulate you first on 10 seasons of this platform. You know, at this point, 2016, you're, like we mentioned earlier, you get a year away from a decade. Like, that is an achievement, because I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I know how much work it is to put into this.
Thank you.
It's been really fun, and it's flown by.
Yeah.
And we did start really podcasting super consistently out of Espacio 1839 on First Street.
Yeah, I know that spot.
Yeah, out of Radio Espacio. And so it's just great that Boyle Heights has these radio stations and places to record and broadcast. It's this art form that I think is like underappreciated. Yeah. And so like Boyle Heights gave us the facilities and the technology and then the community to really get it off the ground.
Yeah, I think underappreciated as a medium, but also super Latinx to Latino. Like, Latino communities love radio. We grow up with radio. It is like so cross-cultural, it's international, it crosses borders. And so I think that is one reason that we have been able to feel really at home in podcasting, because it's an audio form.
And now, what was the reason you guys started that? What was going on during this time frame that you felt inclined to really, voice your opinions and those of the people that you felt were voiceless?
Well, think about 2016 and think about what was happening in 2016. That was like Trump 1.0. Oh, now we're living Trump 2.0.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the reasons. There's so many reasons, but that was one reason that we really felt like we wanted to have a platform. I think at the time, Instagram was like, there were so many like really amazing, and some still exist, but really amazing Latina feminists Instagram platforms, and there were pages, right? And like the one that comes to mind that's like still around and still big is Latina Rebels. And so we were seeing these pages, at least both of us we were seeing these pages and all this really cool discourse and all this really cool stuff happening online. And I think we just wanted to think out of the box. Like, what can we do that we don't really see as being done right now, at least in our community and from our lens, and something that we can do that's in our own lane.
Yeah, and it was very much born out of friendship. We met in person at a meetup organized by these such like Instagram pages, Latina Rebels and Chingon on Fire at the time. And that's where we met for the first time in person after following each other for years on social media. We like went to high school in the San Gabriel Valley. We were around each other at the same time.
But we never met. And even at this event, we didn't know that the other was going.
Yeah.
I'm not one to go, at least at that time, I wasn't one to go to events by myself. But I just felt like everybody's going to be there. Yeah. I just had that feeling that it's just somewhere you have to be today. And I go, and that's when I first meet Mala, and we meet a couple of other women that were still friends. And so it was just this little space where so much creativity was born. Our friendship, it's how we connected. And then a couple months later, we set out to start a podcast without really knowing, at least for me, I didn't really know what that meant and what it would look like and what it would sound like. But I knew I wanted to do it with someone. And Mala was very online at the time and she still is, but very on Twitter specifically, formerly Twitter, now X, very funny and very witty and very smart. And I just felt like she had something that I didn't have, but I knew I wanted to work with her in this way. And so that was how this partnership was born without even realizing what we were going to step into.
Yeah, she like texted me one day and said, "Do you want to start a podcast?"
Damn, just like that, yeah.
Yeah,
literally, just like that.
And we had never spoken about podcasts ever before. I didn't listen to a podcast until we were like 2 seasons in, basically.
The first time ever?
Yeah, I wasn't. Diosa was listening to podcasts and like indie Latino podcasts. So she was already on that wave, and then she reached out to me, and it's history from there.
Yeah. And did you guys have any experience like with producing or putting anything together before that?
I didn't. Mala did a little bit, but I didn't have any experience in podcasting or radio. I went to UC Santa Barbara and there was a radio station and I always wanted to audition. I always wanted to work the sound room, but I was very shy and I was really afraid of trying something new at that time in my life. And so it just felt like in 2016, I just felt like I had a little more courage and podcasting felt like safe enough where I could DIY it. And I attribute that to a Latina podcast called Radio Menea, and they're East Coast based. And they were two writers that were talking about Latinx music and artists. And to me, they would talk about their jobs. And that felt like so accessible. Like, oh, I don't have to be a radio podcast professional. I can just learn it. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah. In undergrad, I studied for a year in London at University College London, and they had a radio station called Rare FM. So for a year, me and my friend had a weekly live radio show.
Okay.
And that was really fun. So that was like my first introduction to radio, broadcast, audio. And at the time, like our radio show had not an Instagram, a Twitter account. And our friends in Massachusetts at Tufts were also on Twitter. So they would like tweet at us, requests. So it was like we had an international audience just by nature of like our undergrad friends were still at school. So yeah, I think it like has all carried over. And I think that the podcast like also has opened doors for us like creatively and otherwise to pursue all kinds of things. I know for me, like it's been a very creative outlet where especially my comedic side, I've been able to really explore. And it was because of the podcast and feedback that like listeners were giving on the podcast, like, oh, Mala's funny. It was something that like I think I was seeing consistently from them. So it gave me the push that I needed to like try stand up. And now like I'm a working stand up, not full time, you know, but like I headline, I get paid, I get booked. I'm in grad school for film and television production at USC. And all of that has been because of the podcast as like a creative outlet where we've not only worked in audio, but we've made short films basically the entire time we've been podcasting. So yeah, and awesome. Diosa has also expanded like her creative and academic endeavors like through the podcast as well, which has been exciting.
Crazy how like something you want to just start from like a feeling of a necessity, right, to kind of express yourself kind of evolves and opens up into these opportunities that you didn't really set yourself up to, you know?
Absolutely. And I think something that's important to share that we haven't touched on yet, but part of what was happening in 2016 was that we were both working at nonprofits and we were both working, at least for me, I was working with predominantly immigrant women, undocumented women, Latinas, women of color. And I just saw a lot in the community and I felt like I wanted to talk not necessarily about them or what they were experiencing, but just like injustice, right? And I think I had just graduated from UC Santa Barbara in 2015. And so you come out of like undergrad super like knowledgeable, but also you want to tell everybody what you learned. And so that really, I felt that the early days of the podcast really carried that energy of kind of like a Chicano studies class, but from your homegirls, right?
Yeah,
we were like coming home and like talking to our friends about what we learned. And I think that's what really resonated with the podcast with our audience at that time, because they felt like they also wanted to talk about what they learned. And I think consistently we've seen that our podcast listeners and our community have kind of mirrored our experience where they were also maybe freshly out of undergrad. Maybe they were starting jobs in nonprofits. Maybe they were teachers. And so we've kind of been able to grow with our audience in that way, too.
And now if you had to kind of reflect on how it started or what it was when it started and how it is now, what are the biggest differences that you see about your show?
Well, we're with a network now, and we just launched season 10 of Locatora Radio under the My Cultura network at iHeartRadio. And we have a second show with iHeart. It's an iHeart Locatora co-production called Senora Sex Ed. We have two shows with iHeart, and we have a budget, and we have a team. You know, we have a producer, and now like a social media manager. So we're growing, and I think we've also, I think that we've deepened our understanding of podcasting because we're not indie anymore, and we're like professionals. And Diosa went to school to learn audio journalism. And so we're just like podcasting at a level that wasn't, I don't think, we had to learn on our own, but we're just podcasting at a whole different level now than we were at the beginning.
again, congratulations on all these, challenges that you stepped up to and succeeded through them, because it takes time. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to touch base with this conversation was just the ability to kind of push through like all these challenges. I think, at least from my part, and I'm speaking as a Mexican-American man, it's, for sure the experience is a lot different. But I think the one common thing is that we're still kind of brought up in households or in environments that see the struggle as part of us to continue improving, like we have to go through the struggle, otherwise we're not doing anything. And I think at some point that weighs very heavily on us, because it feels like if we're not doing that, then are we really, I don't know, what am I trying to say here? Becoming, I guess, what other people want us to be, like your parents in this case. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that there's like this emphasis on struggle, right? And struggling is a part of the human experience. We all suffer. But I do think there is this kind of notion in Latinx, Latino families that you kind of suffer through things and you suffer in silence. I know in my experience when I was growing up, and I would express to my father in particular that I felt stressed. His response was always like, what do you have to be stressed about? You're going to school, you're fine. And that really belittles like what a young person is going through, right? Their feelings, their emotions. And so you kind of learn to internalize or push through. At least that's how it was in my experience. And so, yeah, I do think that now at this point in my life, I feel like, no, I have to make time for rest. I have to make time to take care of my mental health. And these are not conversations that are normalized in our community. I think we've definitely progressed in some ways. And I think that has also been an essential part of the podcast, is talking about our mental health. That's definitely tied to the name of the show, Locatora, right? The word loca. And when we were thinking of naming the show, we were thinking about, well, when women in particular speak out about something or live their lives in different ways, they're usually called crazy. They're called locas. And so really reclaiming that term and questioning, like, well, what does it mean to be a loca? And if me living my life how I want to live it, me setting boundaries, maybe me even stepping away from my family in some way, if that makes me a loca, okay, I'm going to own that and that's okay. So, yeah, I think that we have had these types of conversations on the show for several years, and it's kind of even hard to pinpoint it now to a specific episode, but I will say that it's like an ongoing theme where we're talking about, I think especially like in our early 20s to mid 20s.
Yeah.
Now we're podcasting through a new decade. We're now in our 30s. We've been doing this for a while.
It's true. It's almost like really exploring the human condition of being like a Latina daughter.
Yes.
That's really kind of what it encompasses.
Oh, yeah.
In a little nutshell, you know?
I remember there was this one conversation that we were having on the podcast about, Latina daughters can't lock their door. Because if you lock your door, it's like, why is the door locked?
Why is the door locked?
Yeah, like when you're younger, you're small, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, but even now as an adult,
okay.
in my 20s, I remember us talking about that. Everyone can have boundaries except for a Latina daughter.
There's no knocking.
No.
There's no knocking. It's like knocking while the door is opening.
Yes. I'm coming in.
I remember saying on the podcast, telling my mom, in some cultures, people knock.
Yes, I do remember that.
In some cultures.
Not in this one.
No. But yeah, it's I think what it really comes down to is establishing our sense of self and autonomy and individuality, and getting comfortable vocalizing our feelings and our boundaries with whoever is in our lives. This could be work, this could be school, when you're just out in the world, And so I think it's just, the show has been about finding our own voices and like growing up, and that's like really timeless, and that's a theme. Those are themes that everybody can relate to on some level. So I think when we really break it down, that's what we've been doing on the show.
Yeah, you know what, just a little background information on myself. Like, I was mentioning to you that I was extremely shy. Like, that's the reason why I use a primate to kind of cover up for my own self. But through the podcast, I've been able to kind of grow into myself as well. Like, I was able to kind of break those walls down, and at the same time allow myself to challenge myself in terms of like where I want to be with things, And I was telling a friend a couple of days ago that through the podcast, it allowed me to kind of get better at interviewing when I was getting jobs or something. And it allowed me to have more control of the situation, feel like I can be the one there to question them. And it just kind of, again, it allowed me to evolve, and through that, my relationships evolved, the way I kind of try to serve my community as well. And I think if I had not put myself through that journey, right, I don't know where I'll be, and I feel like podcasts at this point, or just the idea of conversation, has been very integral to my growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interviewing is a skill set.
Yeah, that definitely is.
Talking, you know, expressing an idea, answering a question.
Having a train of thought that comes start, middle, end, you know.
Telling a story, a coherent story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part. And I think that's why a lot of your audience resonates a lot with what you say. Because, you know, from what I've listened to, although I can't always like relate to everything, right? Because I'm still a dude. At the end of the day, like the overall message that you're trying to say is it goes past those boundaries, you know, like, and that's what I think is really important about having space for these conversations, because somebody else listening is just allowing themselves to kind of be a listener, not talk and not interrupt people. And I think that's really hard for us in today's society.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was one of the things we liked in the beginning about the show, is that we could say things to each other, but we weren't being interrupted by someone that necessarily disagreed with us. They could disagree online, absolutely, but you weren't going to be interjecting and cutting us off either.
Yeah, like we could just have our conversation. And if you want to listen, you can listen.
Yeah, or you can turn it off.
Or you could turn it off.
I hope not, but you could. Everyone has free will.
Yeah, but hate listens are also real. And we know that we've had people hate listen because basically they've told us.
Yeah.
They admit to it?
Yeah.
Yes, literally in different ways.
In different ways, yeah.
Now, what has been some of the things that push you to the edge creatively, mentally? Like, what are the things that you have to handle throughout this process?
Oh, God, I feel like I have a breakdown like weekly. Yeah, no lie.
It's like, I don't know, there's just like a lot going on all the time. Like tomorrow we're excited to deliver this talk at the Society of California Archivists, but it's like a long presentation and like we have no work on it.
We haven't done a presentation that long in a very long time.
No.
In several years.
In front of people.
But we know what we're doing, and once we get going, we're going. But it's that type of thing where like work, school, life, gigs, because we gig, you know, we pick up engagements and what have you, jobs here and there as we go on top of everything else. And so sometimes it's hard to carve out time to get everything done and to do things to the extent that like you would really like to execute.
Yeah. And I think like one thing that we've been able to balance is like since Mala's in school, I'm doing a lot of our operations full time. I work on everything that we have, I would say the majority of the week, but there are some things you have to do together, write a speech. So that comes with limitations and time constraints, but like the work still has to get done. So I think, you know, going back to your original questions of what's kind of pushed me in particular is like the business side.
Yeah.
I don't think that people think about podcasting as a business. And yes, there's like podcasting as a hobby, but at this point in where we are in our decade-long career, practically, we're a business and we fell into it. Like I will constantly say I am like not an entrepreneur at heart. I'm a creative at heart, and I've been forced to become an entrepreneur, and I love it. I've learned so much, but that is not naturally who I am. And so having to learn the ins and outs of running a business and having books, right? And making sure your people get paid, making sure you get paid, you know, because if there's anyone that's going to take a pay cut or a sacrifice, it's always going to be the owners of the business, right? And so that means maybe not necessarily getting paid what we want to get paid, but I can do this full time. I don't have to have another job right now. And I feel super blessed that I can be in this space and get paid to make podcasts. And it was what we dreamed of. It's what we worked for. That was like the first 6 years. We like hoped that we could place the podcast somewhere. We originally tried pitching another show around and it didn't land. And then we kind of realized, wait, we have the show. We have the show that the people want.
This is the show.
This is the show. And so when we were approached by the network an executive at iHeart reached out to let us know that they were going to start a Latino network within iHeart. Would we be interested? And she just wanted to let us know, this is what we're going to be working on. Is this something you'd be interested in? And we said, yeah, let's talk more. And so it took about maybe of a year and a half to finally get to that point where we joined. But it took a lot to get us ready. You know, like we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have an LLC. Like we didn't have all of the basic business things that you need.
Yeah, right. And that's a whole different
different thing. Yeah. And so we were operating up until that point very informally. Like when we would get booked for things like, Mala, you got this one. Get it paid to you. You know, and then, okay, I'll do the next one, you know, and we would alternate that way because it was very informal. And we were making money enough to feed it back into the podcast, but we weren't necessarily getting paid ourselves. We had full-time jobs, so we were good in that way. And then, you know, joining the network, it really forced us in a positive way to level up, get, quote, serious about making the show. Because at that point, we were doing it like every other week.
Yeah.
And now we're like on a weekly cadence. But a veces, life happens.
Yeah.
So lo haces cuando te la gana. It's like, Mala, I'm not good this week. Like, we need to put it off.
Yeah.
And it was fine because it was just us. But now we're on a weekly cadence, which is amazing. It's forced us, I think, to really be creative, push, okay, how do we keep this interesting for 30 episodes for a whole season, right? And so it's come with its challenges, but, the silver lining is we get to make podcasts for a living. And that was the dream, and we did it.
Yeah, we make art for a living, and we're self-employed. And we're paying our
Check out all
bills.
the boxes
And we
of
pay
good
our
stuff.
bills, yeah.
We pay our bills. We live in LA. We're young. We're beautiful. ¿Qué más quieren? We're having a great time.
Yeah.
It's a good little life, and there's just more to come. When we least expect it, things pop up for us, and opportunities present themselves. And it's exciting because I think that there's still big things ahead. Like, this is not our final form.
Hey, I love
Absolutely.
that. Now, I kind of want to bring up the whole thing about your achievements. One, you're finishing up your short film and then finishing a marathon. To me, the way I see that kind of stuff, right? It's a mental game. I think even like being on set, I've had the opportunity to help people. I was a guy doing the clapping thing.
Cool.
I don't know the title.
Slate,
the slate guy. There you go. And just being there, observing everybody else. Like, you see the long hours they put into this, like the retakes and all this stuff. And eventually it starts taking a little toll on the people there.
Yes, it's hard. It's laborious.
So, and at the same time, but you have an end goal. You need to complete this. And even if there's hiccups along the way, you kind of have to push through. Same with you. Like, you had to do a physical push through your body, And
Right.
sometimes I think it's easy to forget that a lot of it is mental. And I think once we're able to kind of step aside and see it that way, like, okay, I know how to keep pushing myself forward. Although with limitations, of course, but nonetheless, you can still find a way to kind of navigate through this pressure. Like, how has that been for you in each respective role in this?
Navigating through the pressure of like making the show.
Yeah, no, just
I think for film specifically, right?
exactly.
Oh, for film. So film school has been so amazing. It's almost, in a way, it's like joining the military.
Stop it.
Because things are just, to the way that the program runs, and the way that the sets are run. But I say this, it's not like literally the military. It's Cadet Kelly. It's more like you're at the Cadet Kelly.
Cadet Kelly light.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's just learning a type of discipline and teamwork, and kind of like you're in a beehive and like you're worker bees, and there's a discipline and there's a work ethic because there are these long hours and there are so many people involved, and there's heavy equipment and there's electricity and there's hot lights and like sometimes there's stunts. And I describe all these different elements because it can be dangerous filmmaking and it can be tiring. And so when people are working long hours and they're tired, but they're also like around dangerous equipment, like accidents can happen. So I think what I've learned at film school is like how important it is to keep morale up, to feed everybody, to make sure that like people have what they need so that they can safely make the art piece, So it's just like a really big lesson in teamwork and in like stamina, but in art making, which I think also for the podcast has applied like over the course of years, as opposed to necessarily like a 10-hour day. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had our 10-hour days, and so then it's like taking that, but seeing it in this other discipline. And when you work on a team, it takes off a lot of pressure because it's that we're all in this together thing, and everybody needs to succeed so that the whole thing can succeed. And so it's been cool, And then when I was enrolled in a class called 508, which, the School of Cinematic Arts is like the first degree granting film school in the world. There was a program in Berlin. They had like a film degree that like you could get, that you could like, or there were film classes. But USC was the first place that offered like a valid academic degree in the study of cinema. And so the curriculum is very old, You know, it's like over 100 years old. And they've been teaching movies since like movies existed. So these classes that I'm describing are classes that they've been teaching there for decades, you know? So 508 is this kind of notorious class in the second semester where they put you in trios and you make 3 movies in one semester. So my movie that I wrote and directed is called Duende, and it's like a femme horror comedy film. And Diosa was on set as our assistant director, and starring our friends Scarlett Red and Demi Duenas, and our cinematographer is Phoebe Sifan Liu, and my producer and production sound recorder and sound mixer is Stephen Chen, who are my trio mates. And Duende is, the way that it works there is our productions are USC productions, so we're not allowed to like put them on YouTube or anything like that. We can't show them publicly, but we can submit them to film festivals. So that's like the process that we're in right now, is getting all the proper clearances to eventually get the green light to submit the film to festivals. So hopefully you guys will be seeing Duende in a film festival somewhere in the not too distant future.
It's a great film. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm excited for it to live out in the world because it's really great. Yeah, it's campy, it's funny,
it's campy,
scary,
nice.
spooky, but it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only seen what you've posted online, so that's as much as I know. But I know you completed it a couple weeks ago at this point.
It was last semester, so it was like December of 2024.
Okay. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, and we screened on campus at the Frank Sinatra Hall at the Norris Theater, which is really fun because we've made video content. We've produced and written and directed and acted in video content on our own channels, but it's all been online. So it's been on the phone, on the laptop, and it's a very different experience to see your work on a big screen in a true theater. So that's another cool part of the program is we're in theaters, and that's exciting.
Hey. What about you, Diosa? In regards to the marathon, what was that like? How's that been like? Just those mental games for you?
Yeah, so I would say my running, so I've been running since high school, but I think as an adult, I started really training for like half marathons and 10Ks back in 2022, I think. What year are we in? We're in 2025.
Yeah.
When did I run Long Beach? Yeah, 2021. So, sorry, let me restate. So I started running in 2021, and that's when I started training for my first half marathon. And for me, running just started as I realized that I was working, I had a day job still at the time, working on the podcast. And I just realized like, I don't have any personal goals anymore because the podcast is like basically my job and I love it. And we set goals for that. But I need to set like personal growth goals for myself. And so that's why I started training for a half marathon. And I started training for Long Beach half marathon in 2021. And I was very resistant to running a marathon. I thought marathon runners are unwell. That's so many miles. Why would you choose to do that? And it really felt like something I was okay with not doing. But after running enough half marathons, chasing those PRs, chasing the goals, I realized I was ready for the next thing. But it took me several years to get to that point of feeling ready. And so last year, 2024, I ran my first marathon, the LA Marathon. This past year, I ran it again, my second time. And this time around, it was more challenging mentally. Even though it was my second go around, I was super well prepared. I've been so lucky that my training cycles have been injury-free. I've been able to be really consistent with my training. So I went in very prepared. I knew that I could do it again. My body was ready. But mentally, I started to feel kind of nervous. Like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this again. Like, why did I sign up for this? I've already done it once. And so it was that like mental challenge of reminding myself that I could do it. I've done it before and I was going to do it again. And, having the support of your friends and family, though, like really makes a really big difference. Having people show up for you, having people honestly be inconvenienced. Like being a spectator at a marathon is not convenient. It's not an easy experience, especially now that the course is like starts at Dodger Stadium and ends in Culver City. There's no public transportation, like a one-way. Like you can't take the metro there. You can, but you have to walk. You have to it's not just I'm going to get off the metro y aquí estoy.
Yeah.
And so parking is intense. Like it's very challenging to be a spectator. And so knowing that your friends and family are like willing to get up early, spend their Sunday there, pack you little snacks, make you little signs, buy you flowers. Like showing up for your people in that way, I think, is so important. And I think it's taught me like to also give back, right? Reciprocate that. People show up for me, like I have to show up for people too. And so that's, I think, part of the mental game is like knowing like you're supported, you're loved, you're cared for. People are there to cheer you on. Strangers are there to cheer you on, and that's incredible. Right. But your loved ones are also there too. And that can really help with that mental game of I want to quit. And I really did feel like pretty early on, like mile 6, mile 7, ooh, like what happened if I just like was like, I'm going to go home. Yeah. My family's already at the finish line. No.
Yeah, where should go?
Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah. And so knowing that people were there, like waiting for me, I think also helped me mentally to push through. And I will say there's so much community in running. It can be like a very solitary sport because you're running by yourself. And if you're training by yourself, you know that you're solitude, you're in your thoughts. But when you join a run club, you have that you're kind of like body doubling. Like you have that other person running next to you that's, okay, we can do this. And that happened to me at mile 10. I ran into a señor who I had been training with at Run Montebello Run, a running club in Montebello. And I ran into him and he was like, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo andas? And I was like, no me siento bien. And he goes, okay, we can do this. And we ran together the next 8 miles. And I like really underestimated like how important it was to like run with someone next to me, especially when I was feeling down. And so I think like it shows again like the community aspect, like that can really push you through when you're mentally struggling.
Yeah. And now that you mentioned both of your stories, like I want to kind of pinpoint on like the inner dialogue that you've had through these experiences. What's that inner dialogue that you guys see yourselves having? Because we all communicate with each other. We're living our existence, but we all kind of forget sometimes that we all have our own thoughts even when we're quiet and we have things at play in the mind. And I think a lot of that self-talk has a lot to do with how you present yourself to your environment, you know? So how have these experiences formed your ability to kind of, you know, push through and fighting that resistance in terms of what you guys are doing individually?
Well, I think there's just keep swimming.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going. Just one more step, you know? And also like being in school, owning the business together, like having a producer who works with us, like having a team. It's not just an individual goal. Mm-hmm. There's other people, you know, involved and who I need to like show up for and answer to. You know, and I think that's a good thing because it propels us forward. It keeps us going. It keeps us productive, if not for ourselves and for our little village, for our team, for our community. Deadlines are like necessary to get things done. Yeah. Deadlines help us to stay productive and to work quickly or efficiently if we have to. So we're people who have a lot of ideas. You know, I have so many ideas. It's like overwhelming. I'm like constantly writing down ideas and pitching to the Diosa, what if we do this and what if we do that and what if we do this? But there has to be an infrastructure and like a workflow and some sort of a deadline to actually make any of those ideas come to life, right. You know? And so I think it's about like staying creative, but then also acting on that creativity.
The follow through. Absolutely.
And what about yourself?
Like for the marathon or like for running?
Yeah, I mean, how does that apply? Like the concepts of the running and the mental game and just trying to get through it. Like how has that applied to your life in general?
Well, I think once you run a marathon, like not a lot of things feel that hard anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Like actually, because you put your body through so much and it's 26 miles, but actually I ran 100 miles in February because like
in the month of
February, I ran 100 miles to get me ready to run 26 miles. So it's like, oh, I've actually put my body through so much. Mentally, I've gone through a lot to get to just one day. If I can do that, I can do a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
And so it really does change your perspective on what you can physically and mentally do. And well, how do I want to challenge myself next?
Yeah.
And so it really, you can keep yourself going in that way and kind of set these new goals and things just don't feel as hard because you like did something that was really hard and that not a lot of people do. And not in like a self-important way, but oh wait, I like did something really challenging, really hard. What else can I do? You know, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I think it's really good to have these personal goals that aren't necessarily related to work, to family, to relationships, but they teach you so much and then you go and apply it to your work, to your family, your relationships.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, like a couple of years ago, I took the opportunity to go skydiving. And then since I've done that, and everything else now to this point doesn't even seem as scary, you know, because my biggest fear was the heights, dropping down. I think it was like 15,000 feet, just seeing the scenery, crying as I'm coming down. Like, it just looked beautiful, you know, and everything kind of was shifted back into perspective, like what really mattered. And then since then, I remember how I felt then, and it kind of balances me out when I'm having like a hard time or I'm facing something difficult. Like, okay, if I had the, courage to jump off a plane, I can handle everything else, you know? So it's one of those things that I like to talk about, because I feel like a lot of our experiences always in one way or another are going to come back and affect everything that we're doing. But it seems like you guys have a pretty good head on your shoulders, you know?
We try.
Thank you.
We try.
We try. I'm very therapized. I think that helps.
And I only have one screw loose, just one. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's also why it's so beautiful to have a partner, right? In creativity, in life, because whenever things get really challenging or one person needs to step away or one person is just, life happens, right? Like, you have someone else to lean on, you have a team, you learn to delegate. And I think, like, you learn to kind of just let the relationships evolve, let the relationship evolve into what it needs to be.
And how has that collaboration been between you guys? I mean, like I was mentioning to you before the show, I was doing another podcast back in early 2012, 13 with my friends. And at some point we separated. I used the Marco Antonio Solis reference. Like, I went solo. And then from there, I just kind of kept doing it on my own. But I felt like there was a lot of inner work that we had to kind of figure out. But how's that been with you guys? Because, I mean, it takes effort as well. You guys are spending so much time together, ideas. Like, tell me a little bit about that connection between you.
I think that we sort of complement each other. We do have a lot of similarities, and we are on the same wavelength for a lot of things. Yeah. I think it's crazy. We have a shared sense of taste of certain things, and like what we want to see on the show and what we don't want to see on the show. Generally speaking, we're not arguing about like the content we're sharing or what we're recording or who we're interviewing. We may feel strongly about one thing or another, or, we do have our differences of opinion and ways of doing things. But as far as like creatively, what we're making, we're like very much like in a creative alignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really important, because it's hard to make a show if you simply don't have the same or a similar vision for what you want it to be. Yeah. So that's been really great. And I think we both bring very different elements to the show, to the making of the show, but then to the actual audio itself and what our listeners are hearing. And I think that it seems to work, and listeners are always commenting on like the way that we connect on the show and our chemistry. And so I think there's just something that just clicked.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think we've been really lucky. We went into this partnership, with this creative partnership, as new friends. It's not like we had like decades long friendship where there was a lot of trust. But I think inherently we knew that this person was trustworthy. We had similar values. We had creative alignment. And so we went in like very informally. We have heard stories of partners that have gone in informally and it didn't work out well for them and things ended badly. And we didn't formalize our partnership, our creative partnership, until 2021. So years into it. So we've been really lucky in that way that it just worked. I've never had, knock on wood, right? We've never had a really big fight or anything. We've had our disagreements. Yeah. But there's never been anything that has made us be like, I don't want to work with you anymore,
Yeah.
If anything, we're trying to work more together, right? We expand the business. We're trying to produce more podcasts, produce film, write a book together. Like there's so much that's more that we want to do together. But also still like let our individual projects grow and thrive, but be able to do it under the business because we have the infrastructure. Like Mala can make her film one day and I don't need to necessarily be on it, but you can do it under the production company because the infrastructure is there, right? And so there's, I think, a lot of ways that we support each other. And I think that in any relationship, like you have to let the person grow. Right. And I think that we've been really great at giving ourselves and giving each other the space to grow. Something that I've noticed and I've talked to Mala about it, is that sometimes we'll like talk the whole week, but it's all about work. And I'm like, we're friends. Tell me about you. What did you do today? What did you have for lunch? Tell me something personal. And so I think if anything in this phase of this season of our friendship and our relationship, it has been very work focused because it's had to be, but still like learning and finding ways to carve out time for just like friend time. Let's just talk about stuff that has nothing to do with the business right now.
Yeah. We go to dinner.
We go to long dinners. We love a long dinner.
We love a long dinner. No, I'm grateful. I'm grateful because there are podcast co-hosts out there who are like very open about how they're not friends. They don't like each other. They've physically fought each other like in public places, and they'll do it again. Like, it's wild, you know, talking bad about their host in interview, like in the press. And it's so foreign to us.
Yeah.
It's just not what we've experienced or how we operate. So, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's working well. And I think we're gonna just keep getting better. We have a solid foundation, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like at this point we're like family, you know, more than friends. Like, our families know each other. Like, we know a lot about each other's families.
Your mom hangs out with my grandma.
Yeah.
Like, they're friends.
They're friends.
Nice.
Yeah, we're like very connected in that way. Like, once the families get involved,
it's
like,
over.
That's it.
We're married.
Yes.
We're married. No, that's awesome. I mean, and that really radiates off of your show. You know, I've listened to a few episodes, and like you mentioned, that chemistry is definitely there, and like it allows you to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. At the same time, having somebody, like, it helps you. Not that you can't be self-accountable on your own, but having another person is also like that extra weight to be like, okay, you know, I got to do it too because she's putting in her effort into this too. So it's that balance that allows you to kind of, again, continue growing, pushing each other. And like you said, giving that space, because I think even I'll do that myself sometimes. I'll step away from the show for a couple of weeks just to kind of disconnect, hang out with some friends, and like then maybe whatever experiences I lived through that time frame, I come back on the show like with a new perspective or a new idea that I want to talk about, you know. And I think that it's a cycle.
Absolutely. I think artists need to live. Artists need to actually go out into the world and live. And I have been feeling that way more and more as someone that works from home. Like, I'm in my little editing cave so many days out of the week, right? I'm just like at my desk working. And then it's like, oh, I need to go step outside. Like, I actually have to experience life, and I have to go to things, and I have to show up places, because it all like fulfills that creative cycle of being inspired and wanting to work on something and just having that extra something, you know, that you need to. So you have to like go out and live in the world. You can't just be making the show.
Yeah.
Because then what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's so important. I mean, it's all about like living through an experience, because once you've lived through an experience, now you have a story.
Exactly.
And it's all storytelling.
Now, how did you guys build this mentality of work and like pushing yourselves to get things done? Was it something that you guys learned through your families growing up, or is it something that was more of like a self-initiative thing that you took upon yourself?
Oh, well, Diosa is much better at this than I am. Yeah. She keeps us on task.
I'm pretty bossy.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great. In this dynamic, I am a sub. I'm like, yes, tell me what to do, what's going on. Like, Diosa is very much in charge. You know? And so, like, she keeps us going. She keeps us on schedule and on task, and that's great. I'm like not interested in a power struggle at all. I'm like, yes, queen. Like, tell us what's happening.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm a good Catholic school girl. All right. I follow the rules, but now I set the rules, right? But I think, I don't know, honestly, who I learned that from. We were talking about that the other day, is we don't have business owners in the family.
No.
Like, we don't have entrepreneurs in the family. So having to learn that by ourselves, but we've been mentored by incredible friends, community leaders. Like, we're definitely not doing this alone or in silence, but we've been mentored over the years. But in terms of like, I don't know, like a structure, a workflow, like I kind of just like learn as I go, and I find things that work for us. We've tried things that it hasn't worked, and we let it go, and we try different things.
I like that.
I did work, I will say, I will credit her. I did work for this amazing woman, Alicia. And when I had my job, she was running operations, and I was her assistant. And I learned so much from her in terms of running a business, operations, having these workflows, these day-to-day things that you have to do to have your business run. And so I did learn that from her. If there's anyone I could attribute it to, I would say she was probably my first teacher in that way, that I got to do like hands-on. I was doing it for her, but I was the one doing it.
Yeah.
You know, but she was guiding me and teaching me. So I definitely credit her to that.
Damn. No, I mean, it's, you know, we all learn things. It's like that saying that it takes a village, you know, like sometimes you know, you think you grow up and you see like your parents as like these role models, which they can always still be. But once you start expanding your knowledge of the people around you, you start like, wait, I can learn something from him, from them, and just kind of make it your own identity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And people ask us all the time, like, about having their creative projects. And I'm like, keep your job as long as possible because you can learn so much from wherever you are.
Right.
You know, if you're being managed, right? If you have a manager, you can learn so much from your manager. And even if they're not a good manager, you can learn how to not be like that, you know?
Yeah, everything's a life lesson. Dude. Like if you're really taking the opportunity to look into it, like you learn from it. And I think that's a different perspective that a lot of people should kind of work towards. But outside of that, like in terms of your audience, has there been any specific, I guess, feedback that you receive from them that hypes you up or at the same time kind of makes you wonder about it weeks after? You're like, wait a second, like, damn, I mean,
Oh, we live for our audience. They have us in check.
Yes, they do.
We know at this point what our audience,
what they want,
what they won't like.
Yes,
we'll know like, oh, we cannot talk about that.
What they won't tolerate.
They hold us accountable. Yeah. Like our listeners will let us know, like, I did not like how you talked about that because X, Y, Z.
They're very
expressive, you know. And so that has, I think, helped us in producing the show. Like, I think that they'll like this. I know they won't like this. There was like recently a podcast talking about, I'm going to speak about it very vaguely, apologies.
Yes.
Recently this podcast was talking about a celebrity. And I told Mala, I was like, we wouldn't even be allowed to talk about the celebrity because the celebrity is not progressive. They're not like radical. They maybe haven't taken a stance on certain things that our audience wants to support celebrities that are taking very like intentional stances on direct, clear stances on issues. Yeah. So in that way, like we know, oh yeah, we can't have that person on our show. We can't even talk about that person on our show in a positive way because our listeners will be like, ooh, but remember when they did this thing?
Right. Yes.
And so it does keep us in check and it keeps us like, it keeps us very mindful and honest and intentional about the things that we cover.
It keeps the values consistent.
Yes. Yeah.
It keeps the values and like the mission consistent because that's what they expect. You know, it's been 10 seasons and they'll still ask us for like original content and original types of content from like the first 5 seasons, you know, like all this time later, they want to hear the commentary about social issues. They want to hear our thoughts about what is the social justice happening of the day, you know? And it's like it's not just pop culture, but it's like how it applies to us and how we interact with what's happening out in the world. And pretty specifically as Latinas, you know? And so it's a point of view from our like lived experience that they're tapping into and maybe they share or they are looking for like someone who reflects or mirrors their politics and the way that they're existing in the world. So it really is about being ourselves and like expressing ourselves like as we truly are, at least to an extent on the show, because we also do have to be mindful of like our own privacy. And that's something that as we've been podcasting, like I think each year we become a little more professional. I think we tighten up just a little bit more. We share less about like our specific details about our personal lives. We keep things a little more vague and we'll talk about what we're up to and what we're doing, but it's not like it was in the early days. You know, we keep it creative. Yeah. For the most part.
Yeah, and some feedback that we got recently from our listeners is that they actually want to hear more of Mala and I just talking, you know, about a topic. And I think myself in particular, I've like really tried to give the show like this professional angle and let's do more interviews and let's make it less about us. Let's like bring some journalism into the show, which I think at its core has always been there. But I think now it's like we'll on air cite who we're referencing, right? Where before it's like, yeah, we know we're citing someone and maybe we won't say it on the show because we didn't realize like maybe why we should, right? But now it's like, no, we're citing. Where did we read this? You know, who's the original reporter of this? And so I think that I've been trying to bring that into the show and we've been doing that. But overwhelmingly, our listeners like want us to talk. They don't be citing anybody. Cite yourself, basically.
Yeah. What do we think about things?
Yeah.
Not us quoting other people about what they think about things. So they want to know what we think.
Yeah. And I think something that we've like really tried to, like a value of the show is always like passing the mic. And so for us, that's meant bringing on people that can talk about an experience that we can't talk about. So I think this season, like in some ways, we're like getting back to like our origins, back to our roots of making the show maybe a little more conversational with each other, but finding a way to still do it in a professional way. Yeah. And so one way we're doing that is we're segmenting things. It's a segment now. It's a segment where we're catching up, we're checking in, we're talking about tal cosa, but then there can still be an interview component as well.
Yeah, now we have a few minutes here before we wrap this up, but I did want to just reflect on the fact that, like you mentioned, 2016, we got Trump 1.0 happening. We're in 2025, we got 2.0. Like, how has that changed anything in the way you kind of want to keep moving forward with your show at this point, like 9 years later? Is there a new fire? Is that fire still the same?
I mean, we literally are addressing literal fires on this season because of the fires that took place at the top of the year and like the hellfire of Trump 2.0. Like, it's like actually, we're actually surrounded by flames. Yeah. And so I think it just reminds us that when we're producing our episodes and when we're thinking about our guests and the themes and what we're talking about, that we need to provide some balance to our audience. We're doing this series called Totally Nostalgic, and it's like a 2000s it's a 2000s like deep dive into Latinos in that time period in the early 2000s who were popping off and how they contributed to pop culture and just the culture in general. But we just interviewed Senator Sasha Renee Perez. She's talking about the bills. She's a state senator in California from the San Gabriel Valley. She's talking about the bills that she's presenting at the Senate level. She was talking on the show about the efforts for recovery in Altadena in the wake of the fires. So we're talking about very serious issues that are impacting real people, but then we're also doing our nostalgic look back at J-Lo and our favorite, and Ricky Martin, and MTV3. And it's that balance of we are surrounded by flame, we are in the middle of hellfire, politically and otherwise, but we also need to give ourselves a mental break from that and like maybe lean into things that are comforting and that make us feel good. And if, talking about Christina Aguilera's Dirty album is what does it, like, so be it,
Yeah, I actually think that's one of the reasons our listeners are wanting more of that this year. I think at the beginning of the show, the first couple of seasons, we would talk about the show as escapism in a way. We were doing analysis. We were providing like original like commentary about the state of the world, but we very much would say this on the show. We're not a news podcast. There's plenty of news podcasts. You can listen to those. Like, we want you to feel like this is a little dose that can get you through the day. Right. We want you to leave feeling lighter. And I think that's one of the reasons this year in the Trump 2.0 era, in this new administration, our listeners are asking us, like, actually, can you like lighten it up a little bit and listening, but giving that balance? Because like we also have listeners that are like, no, I want to hear you talk about immigration. I want to hear you have people come on and talk about how they're changing their community, the work that they're doing. And so I think this season, it really is about finding that balance of, yes, let's give you some escapism, but we're also going to give you some really important interviews, because we haven't really talked about that yet on this show, but we see Locatora Radio as an audio archive. We're archiving the present of our community, of the people that are changing anything in their community, the artists, the culture makers of this current era. And so we also want to give the podcast the room to be the archive. And that means having these hard conversations. So you can look back 10 years from now, right? And think about what was happening in 2025, in 2016, in 2017, right? And so it's really important for us to, I think, have that balance of both.
You guys are doing it.
Thank you.
It's amazing that you guys are so consistent with it, and the way you talk about it, like there's still a lot more to be completed, and I think that's what you really want, because hope is something that just as humans drives us to hope for the future. So I hope you guys keep doing it for another 10 years as well, just seeing the whole different phases of your lives happening.
Our 30s. We're podcasting through our 30s now. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us. And I also hope you keep doing it.
Thank you so much. Where can people find your show?
So you can listen to our show anywhere you get your podcast, but most especially on the iHeartRadio app. You can tune in to Locatora Radio, a radiophonic novela, or Señora Sex Ed, which is the new show that we launched in partnership with iHeartRadio. And you can always leave us a comment and review and share with a friend.
Well, thank you so much again for making that time to come out here. Everybody else, you're listening to the Social Primate on KQBH LA, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM. And we'll see you guys next week.
What mean the world to me? What mean the world to me? It's being free.
What? Can you imagine with the night sky, no stars in sight? Cause of the smog, but I'm the star, so it's nice despite. In the passenger side, the 105 toward the southeast of LA, where the realists reside. The first generation kids keeping dreams alive, doing things that their parents crossed the desert to find. In the trunks they hide, wrapped in blankets tight, scared to death that the cops might find and deny. Finally make it decide, but no bet that can lie. My grandpa working at a bakery, sweet bread to provide, and so I carry his dreams in my blood. I'm trying to reach my peak, free flowing, so I tried to become, but the pressure can numb my mind going dumb. Turn the volume up a bunch, windows down, then I gun, cause I'm free flowing. I'm living free and flowing.
What mean the world to me?
I'm living free and flowing. I'm free flowing. I'm living free and flowing. I'm living free and flowing. I'm an anomaly. I know there's no one quite like me. I hit the stage and face the store cause they ain't never seen. Yeah, sometimes it's flattery. My cheeks turn pink, but I can't help to think they doubted me. That's preconceived, and so I use my mind to imagine up a different world where you can choose to do whatever that you wanted, girl. An expectation where success instead of halts and hurls. And eyes so big cause they cannot believe what they've observed. But that utopia impossible. Instead of thinking about the probable, I'm gonna be the best that you ain't know. The one and only gold. I am my only mode. Stand alone, watch me show, question what you know. Free flowing, I'm living free and flowing.
What mean the world to me?
I'm living free and flowing. I'm free flowing, I'm living free and flowing.
Live and let live and
I'm
just
living
let
free.
it be.
Navigated my life because I didn't want the same things that paralyzed the women that before me came. I question every day if these ambitions is a waste. If dreaming like I do will make my family feel disgraced.